Yo guys, welcome to The Last Lap. Don't forget to drop a lovely, juicy 5-star rating if you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to The Last Lap podcast. It's myself, Niran, here, and Tommo is, alas, in Morocco at the moment, enjoying his life, enjoying the sun. A slacker, in my opinion. Absolute slacker. He's out eating, hummus and got the dips out.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm jealous. Moroccan. It's sensational.
Mate,
food. It's unreal. Instead, I'm joined by Peter here from McLaren Fan TV. How are we doing, boss?
We're trying.
We're trying.
We've arrived
after that Bahrain Grand Prix. We're trying.
Listen, man. Saudi settings. You know what I mean? We're ready. We're ready to go, man. We're ready to go. Big up to the McLaren Fan TV crew.
Yeah.
Big up Mahad as well, co-host as well. But yeah, Peter on pole, man. We're here.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
We're out here, and we've got Cam as well, returning it back, ready to beef Mercedes, beef mate. Ferrari, beef everybody today.
Mate, I'm on it. I'm here to pod. Niran, let's go. Let's go. Lots to talk about, mate.
Yeah, there is. Obviously, we've had the first Grand Prix of the season. We can take a decent amount from it, and I think one of the first storylines really to go with from Bahrain is, in fact, Mercedes. I think the expectations that we had for that first Grand Prix of the season, after Mercedes bringing back some pace through Brazil, grabbing that win, of course, with George Russell fighting for the win at Cota last season, to have taken a step backwards, to even be behind Aston Martin, a customer team.
Gosh, Niran, what are we doing? First things first, mate. Let me talk to the Brazil piece. You know that the Brazil piece was fake.
Yep.
That was absolutely fake. Flattered to deceive.
Rigged for money and views.
We only won as Mercedes that race because Red Bull, in free practice, fudged up their floor height. That's why we won. That's why we won. It was an unpure pace, and ultimately that flattering to deceive has led to them sticking with a remixed version of the W13 0.5 pods. What are we doing, Niran? This is I've had enough. This is chaos. Let's break it down and try and make some sense of this. 0.5 pods don't work in an era where barge boards are disallowed. The new rules and regs, no barge boards. So you have to, as a team, manage the wake off of those front tyres outboard. Otherwise, what are you going to get, chaps? Instability on the apex every single time. And what are Lewis and George complaining about? What have they been complaining about in testing and free practice and Bahrain? Instability, poor balance at the rear of the car. Side pods. What are we doing, Mercedes? This is a joke now. And if we want to be UNICEF and Oxfam and do the kumbaya and have marshmallows around the fire, then cool, that's the modus operandi. That's what we want to do, mate. But if we're a championship winning team, if we want to win the 9th constructors and Lewis is 8th, then something needs to change.
Yeah. The problem, it feels like there's a big ego problem now at Mercedes, in the sense of, like, we've gone with this idea, we have to see it through. You know, when you make like a bad decision of a nightclub you're going to go to on a night out, and you brought out all your friends with you,
Niran.
and you get there's 6 other people in the club, but you stay there for like 2 hours because you have to firm it. That's what's going on right
Niran,
now.
Fail fast. Any management book worth its metal will tell you, fail fast. If you hire somebody that can't do the job, don't persevere with them. Don't throw good money after bad. Write it off. Move on to the next one. And these guys, you're right, Niran, they're exhibiting a form of technical arrogance. Exactly what Dan Fallows, who, by the way, Aston Martin did a very good thing in signing, Adrian Newey, deputy, and Adrian Newey don't do. They're open to exploring all ideas. Hence why these guys are now first and second on the grid, being Red Bull and Aston Martin. What are we doing, Mercedes?
The thing is, it's the start of the season. You know, we've had one race, and obviously Toto's even come out. I don't know what the PR team at Mercedes is saying, but like, you know, even he's coming out and saying, look, this ain't what we hope it will be. So you kind of think there's a bit of ownership and sort of owning their mistakes. But then it's like, well, should you be giving that kind of information out to the Mercedes fans, as well as maybe not even changing anything at all? Because they are pursuing, as we've just discussed, they are seeming to just continue to go down this road, even though they know it leads to no success whatsoever. So it's weird, because it's like, it's only race one, you know, and we got 22 to go.
Peter, I will say, bro, if you're being very nice, that What happened to all this data that we gathered over the last 12 months, right? Last season was meant to be a fact-finding mission.
Yeah.
So where you're just going to fact-find and then
Strap
not
bare
act on
stuff onto Lewis Hamilton's car.
Or all of that nonsense, kilograms earlier on in the season. What happened to that? You can't just research and then not take action.
Yeah.
Marvin Gaye, what's going on? I don't understand. This is just I'm through it. And then lastly, I'll say on this because I don't want to go full troops mode 2017.
It's all right. No, let it loose.
Let's go. Lastly, I will say on this, Lawrence Stroll, absolutely worthy of some credit for turning around Aston Martin. People have said it's a bit suspicious and yada yada yada. To Lawrence's words, Papa Stroll.
Yeah.
There's a couple foundations on which you build a championship winning team, right? Infrastructure, 250 million worth of mega factory they're building that will come online in May of this year. Tick. Secondly, people. Forget all the other stuff. If you get, there are only a few people in the world that are capable of building a championship winning car. True or false?
True.
Right. Dan Fallows. How were Mercedes not in for Dan Fallows?
Yeah.
How have Mercedes let Eric Blondin go? How did they outsource Allison to Ineos to go and build boats or whatever? How have they let James Vowles go
To Williams.
Yeah.
at a time when you could argue that they need these key personnel the most?
Sure.
What are we doing?
It almost gets forgotten about, doesn't it, in the world of Formula One? Because it's almost like the equivalent in football where you just you suddenly sack off your chief scout and you let your top physio go.
Yeah.
And all of these things come together to be able to people manage and obviously build a good car, research and development, all this jazz. It's not just a technical director.
Right.
It's not just Toto Wolff, for example.
Your success is a function of each one of these components. I'm telling you, Niran, Peter, it feels like Arsenal 2018 settings distance for Mercedes.
God.
Good grief.
Massive transition and post Sir Alex Ferguson, Man United.
Mustafi play it all
Bro.
jazz, man.
El Neni, it's that type of those who just lazing about. I feel like there are similarities between both circumstances. Mercedes need to turn it around, man.
Do you believe in the noise that's been going on about Lewis had an idea of how this car should run this season, and it seemed like they hadn't been listening to him this year. But then he's sort of playing it down in front of camera where he's like, no, there's no issues here necessarily. We're going to do our best to work on this car. And also, second part, how can we still be, we've done a year of this regulation and yet teams like Mercedes are struggling to find what's the best sort of aero package to get the best out of a car this season. It's like it's taken them too long, especially Mercedes, a team like that. Whether the budget cap thing is part of that problem because they can't really just outspend their way out of the problem.
Mate, to your last point, of course the budget cap is part of the problem, right? Because Mercedes have been in the habit of just throwing 400 million at the problem and fixing it. That's what they've been on. To your first around Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton, I think this worries me and concerns me more than anything else at Mercedes. Because Lewis has been patron saint, master PhD level patience for the longest time, right?
Yeah.
Always towing the party line. Come on, guys, let's push our next race. Yeah. It's been a bit of an SH1T show this, but let's gather together again.
Respect you're not swearing, by the way. Don't get demonetized.
Mama Cameron's going to be watching, so we can't do that. He's been the bastion of everything holy and saintly as far as leadership, right? But that slipped as of last race because you heard on Sky Sports F1, the podcast.
Yeah.
I told them, he says, quote, and as an ears makes no difference quoting. I told them that it was instability at the rear. I've driven loads of cars like this before and they didn't listen.
Yeah.
That's a departure from the usual tone the line stuff that we've seen from Lewis, right? And that concerns me as a Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes fan, I'll be honest.
I just don't understand that. He's the one. Look, he's a 7-time world champion, and he is the one driving the car. If he provides you feedback, you've got to listen to that. Realistically, you can't just go, "Yeah, Lewis, look, I hear that, but
bruv,
0.5 of a side pod over there, looking kind of nice." Just
technical arrogance, bruv.
Yeah.
Mike Elliott. Every time I hear him talking, even when he's talking about the Plan B and potentially technical arrogance. epitomise the very thing that Adrian Newey and Darren Fellows have built a career off of not having. What are we doing, chaps? This is nonsense.
Do you not think as well, though, from the engineering side or the people that gather the data, that there's probably some conflicting results? So like the numbers are saying one thing, hence why they've gone through this. I am trying to be nice to Mercedes here, but is there a point where, look, Lewis says one thing and maybe George as well says the same thing, but then they're getting data and analysis all winter long and they're thinking, no, I don't think we should go down that road. We should definitely take this route.
So I've run through the same thought experiment, Peter, and here's where it falls down. Aston Martin, customer car, customer team, are using 50% of the parts that Mercedes is using. To boot, they also use the same wind tunnel, Peter. So how are we talking about data correlation disconnect if Aston Martin are like half a second down the road challenging the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull?
And have gained so much time from last year as well.
This is chaos, gents. It just doesn't make sense. And I just feel like I feel like, as far as what I do think you can say about the disconnecting data correlation is, as far as opportunity cost, if they're looking at Red Bull, because this is the question you're asking, Peter, right? Why didn't they follow the design philosophy of a Red Bull or an Aston Martin? And I think there is something to be said from that. But all that I'm hearing in the paddock is that they're seeing, minus the instability at the rear, that Mercedes is seeing the performance that they had seen in the off-season, in the wind tunnel and the CFD models. They're seeing it, but they just mismanaged their expectation and didn't foresee the rest of the grid
moving up,
finding another half a second.
I think the problem is as well, it's almost like, I did mention Ego earlier, but it's kind of like, I get it as well, because it's almost a little bit too late now. There's that element of like, they have gone down such a radical route that is so different to Red Bull, to even Ferrari and obviously Aston Martin as well, that if they were to go next season, look, we hold our hands up here, we've made a mistake, we'll just go to their model. They've now got 2 years of catching up to do in terms of development on that model and learning that they've missed out on because they've been trying to no side pod setting.
It looks bad, Niran. It does look bad if you're Toto Wolff and you go into that annual board meeting as chair or a non-exec and you're like, oh, we're going to do what Red Bull are doing. But you know what this reminds me of? I was talking to my boy Nash the other day. People say, if you hire Johnny Cochran, then you look guilty. If you hire Johnny Cochran, you look guilty. But how about we look guilty, free, roaming around, walking? Sack off the perception here. It's not that. The side pods, in an era where there are no barge boards, and it's mission critical to manage the wake off of the front tyre. You need side pods. Side pods are obviously the floor's fundamental in that as well, but the side pods are really, really important. Hence why between last season and this, you see Red Bull extending the width of their side pods, similar to Aston Martin. And that's why they're not experiencing instability at the rear mid-apex. And we, as Mercedes, are, because they've got this technical arrogance and they're pursuing this bloody design philosophy that hasn't worked for the past 12 months. What are we doing?
You don't see any progress, any success with the way it currently is, because I kind of admire the fact that Mercedes have gone a different route and said, you know what, let's try and be innovative in another way, and not have to do this catching up process. Because now, of course, if you're 2 years behind, then good luck. And let's be honest, when regulations do change, there's usually one team that hits it hard and then they kind of dominate Formula One for as long as those regulations last. Do you not see Mercedes then at all winning a championship, at least the constructors, with their own way of thinking, as opposed to maybe having to try and adapt to whatever Red Bull, Aston Martin are doing? Because Ferrari they're a bit different, aren't they, from the teams we've mentioned? So, and they've got their pluses and their minuses, but it's their own thing. So you just don't, you're not a believer.
Doesn't work, Peter.
Bottom line.
Zero pod doesn't work. No, genuinely though, mechanically, aerodynamically, doesn't the thesis doesn't stack up. Hence why you see the 9 other teams on the grid going a different way. Surely at some point, I get what you're saying, Peter. You want to be a pioneer as Mercedes, right? You don't want to follow fashion and do what the rest of are doing, not just because, not for follow fashion's sake, but it works. It works. To Toto Wolff's point, the stopwatch doesn't lie, except for Abu Dhabi 21. It hasn't lied since. It hasn't lied since, true or false?
Sure.
So in March of 2023, the stopwatch isn't lying. So what are you going to do? Change your design philosophy. change your effing car, to Christian Horner's words in Netflix.
Yeah.
Change your car.
Yeah.
He was very right.
Change your car. He was very right then, and he's very right now. Change your design philosophy. And thank God, March of 2023, sounds like Toto's finally coalesced and said, we're going to change the philosophy because this is a SH1T box.
Sure.
No, eventually. That was the line that they took in the first instance. Eventually it will come round and we'll break it.
Give it some years and no.
2 days later, he's completely changed tack to 180.
Yeah.
Eventually this car isn't going to work, and so we're going to change it. Thank all of the racing gods.
Yeah, and the PR teams understood that as well. A statement from them. They're sort of apologising basically for how Bahrain went, which I find crazy, to be fair. That I understand, having to come out and say, look, listen, this isn't what we expected and whatever. But I mean, Ferrari have been giving us this shit for years.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? And they haven't come out and apologised for it on Twitter.
Fair. but they're in a very different position, aren't they, Niran? Because it's not, their car is fast, but it's just a tyre eater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I feel like the Tifosi have less to be despondent about than Mercedes. And that's why the PR guys had to come out and say, it's been 12 months now and nothing's changed. Peter, to your point, very quickly about improvement, define improvement for me, mate. Because a lot of my Mercedes fan mates are saying, well, listen, we are faster than we were last year. Ball feathers, what's that got to do with the price of bread, lads? What we're concerned about here, what I'm concerned about as a Lewis Hamilton fan, is him winning the 8th championship. So all I care about is the delta between us, Lewis, and whoever's top. Who's at the top of the timesheet and what's the delta saying? And the truth is, if that's the metric that we need to look at, the truth is that we are further behind Red Bull than we were last season. You only need to look at the super times. 0.3 in qualifying versus Red Bull. It's gone bigger.
I'll tell you what, in terms of the main goal, obviously, here being Lewis Hamilton's 8th world title, for the sake of argument, Mercedes finished 4th in the constructors at the end of the season. Aston Martin continue the pace they've got right now. Ferrari a comfortable 2nd. Red Bull say win the constructors championship. You're Lewis Hamilton, both of you. What do you do at the end of the season? Do you go somewhere else? Do you think about leaving Mercedes? Do you stick with the eventual 0.75 side pods we'll get next season?
Man, that's a tough.
Or do you release an EP? There's a lot of...
I'm still waiting for this mixtape of Lewis Hamilton's, by the way. I'm still waiting. By the way, I'm still waiting.
2027 soon come.
What do you do if you're Lewis? I think he firms it because who can he go to where he can trust that, this is going to be better for me to get this 8th title? Let's say, for example, I don't know, Alonso decides to leave or whatever. Aston Martin looks sort of appetizing now. But I think Mercedes haven't won 8 Constructors' Championships by luck. They know what they are doing. They do know what they are doing. And we cannot, yes, it's been a horrible 12 months and it could be a horrible 24, but it doesn't discredit all the other hard work they've done. Fair enough, they're different eras, but I think Lewis sticks it out one more year. And I'll be honest, he gets an 8th title before he retires with Mercedes. Let's be very clear. Let's be very bold. It's not even bold, is it? It's not even bold, is it?
How, Sway? But the 8th title, how you expecting Mercedes to come on that much in 12 months?
But I think within the next 2, at least, let's say if Lewis is here for 2 years, for 2 more years, I think he wins his 8th title by then.
Wow. Here's hoping, bruv. I would love to share in your optimism, but...
And don't get me wrong, I have no real affinity with Mercedes whatsoever, except that you provide us with an engine, us being McLaren, right? But and Lewis left us, by the way, so I still haven't...
Wouldn't have that person.
I mean, I'm just saying, innit? When he was sending them digs in that when he talked about post Bahrain and he was talking about, look, I've been here before, I've had cars like this before. I'm sitting there like, oh really, Lewis?
Have you? Yeah,
just after I left you alone, Sir Lewis. I left you alone, didn't I? But anyway, no, I love him to bits. But nonetheless, I do think that Mercedes will sort this mess out, and who knows, it could just be a 200k salary, job that somebody comes in and it absolutely cleans this mess up. Because I don't think the problems are far for Mercedes. It's just, will they let their pride get the best of them? Is really the question.
Mate, I don't know, bruv. I'm on it. So as far as Lewis is concerned, there's a couple of things working in Mercedes' favour, right? being the fact that Lewis is 38 years old and he's now focused on more than just winning a race and 25 points. This is all about legacy for him. The Hamilton Commission, Project 44, all of this stuff, diversity, inclusion. After George Floyd's death, you can see his shift isn't just, I mean, he's getting old now, right? I'm not saying he's going to retire imminently, but he's got to consider what he's going to do after steering an F1 car, surely. Yeah. And in that sense, I think Mercedes' brilliance in managing and working with Sir Lewis Hamilton is in the fact that they've allowed this facet of Lewis's interest to blossom. I was just listening to him talking to Toto. Tommy Hilfiger deal, that deal would never have happened were he still at your mate's McLaren. With Ron just suffocating him. Absolutely. Get your trim this way, no facial hair.
Yeah.
He's at Mercedes now.
Zero trim.
Oh, mate.
Negative trim back.
No trim.
1,000%. It was crazy.
McLaren was suffocating, man. McLaren was suffocating. If he were still at McLaren and Ron Dennis were his charge, post George Floyd, he couldn't talk about this.
No.
Ron Dennis isn't having that. No. And so Mercedes, in allowing Lewis to spread his wings as a social justice guy and a person, a human being that has interests outside of overtaking Max Verstappen in 25 points. Yeah. I think that's the reason why he will stick at it. Still we rise, right? Never give up each and every single time. I don't think he's going anywhere.
Facts. I just want to see him at Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso.
Oh, my.
One last dance.
Oh, with Alonso?
Yeah. Lance Stroll gets demoted at the family Christmas dinner.
Chaos, mate.
But you know what is telling, though? You know how they were sort of like buddies post-race when Alonso and Hamilton had that little interchange and they were sort of smiling, hugging each other.
Yeah.
It's that sign. You remember Wenger and Sir Alex? They had beef, right?
Yeah.
And then once Wenger wasn't a threat to Sir Alex, they started becoming pally.
Yeah. They went out for dinner.
I literally looked at that and I thought, holy smokes, is there something I'm clocking here? Why is he smiling? Lewis should not be smiling with this Don. Right? Listen, I love Alonso. I got time for both of them. But to see that interchange made me think, like, maybe it is just respect, you know, it's just, you know, man-to-man respect outside of thing, whatever. And it's so many years. But a part of me felt like, if Alonso is capable, even comfortable enough to even do that, and Lewis is also just like kind of taking it, like they're sharing, mics and whatever, I'm thinking, oh, this is a worry. If you're Mercedes, you could look at that and think, we're not challenging even Aston Martin anytime soon. That's a worry.
Oh,
that would be the worry.
Because Lewis is being pally-pally with Alonso?
Yeah, they're both pally-pally with each other.
So I think, mate, you've got to give some, I think you touched on it earlier, Peter, you've got to give some credence to them just maturing and getting older, right? It's not 2007 anymore.
Sure.
You're not dealing with Alonso pulling up at Hungary and not and not
forgetting to drive.
Yeah.
Pulling my hair out that season.
Oh, mate, what a season, by the way. But I just think they're in a different position. Lewis is out there taking these Donnies for like full course meals and paying for the entire bill. So I think he's in a different place, and we just want to be cognizant of that. Don't expect, it's not 2007 anymore. So don't expect Lewis to move like he's 22, 23 years old. It's not that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Alonso and obviously Aston Martin as well, I mean, whilst we're discrediting Mercedes, we've got to give some credit to Aston Martin as well. I mean, we came to the start of the 2022 season and that Aston Martin was literally a caravan. We're talking 8th, 9th constructors in the light championship sort of level car.
100%.
So we've gone from that level to where we stand now with Aston Martin.
Yeah.
I mean, just first of all, what on earth is that rise down to? Like, the delta between last season and this season is crazy.
2 seconds worth, some people say. So people, like we touched on earlier, Dan Fallows is a magician with all things aero, spent 14 plus years under the stewardship of a man who exhibits zero technical arrogance, in stark contrast to our mates at Mercedes, Adrian Newey. Again, Adrian Newey did his thesis at uni once upon a time on ground effect in sports cars. So if anyone in 2023 you want to have learned and spent 14 years with,
absolutely,
Adrian Newey, I don't know why we didn't, so not to take it back to Mercedes, but I don't know why Mercedes didn't sign him, but I think that is a key driver, Niran.
Yeah.
Dan Fallows is a genius, and he's not the only one. Eric Blondin is an absolute genius, according to people at the paddock, and they've signed both of those. Lots to come with the mega factory, 200 million spent by Papa Stroll. I think they're in a good place, and Alonso will help them.
Yeah, facts. I mean,
Alonso will help them.
I mean, he can get the most out of any car, even if it's a little bit shit. I mean, that Aston Martin, I think, as well during testing, everyone was saying just like, you could see the Alpine, for example, was sort of bouncing around, not quite looking as stable. That Aston Martin looked like it was on a Scale X6 track.
Yeah, it's weird because when Alonso announced that he was going to Aston Martin at that time, Alpine obviously were a strong fourth place team, right? And you sort of thought, what the hell's going on here? But Alonso, one thing you can, in the years I've watched him, he does not deal with unserious people. He hasn't got time for it. And as soon as you're unserious, guess what?
Unserious?
He's out. He's out. He's just like, you know what? This is a clown's car we've got here. We've got a great car. It's not reliable. This is the Alpine I'm talking about. It's a great car. It's got the people around managing it. I mean, you look at Renault, right? In the past 5 years or so, it's been hilarious what's going on there, because they really should be looking at Aston Martin thinking, what the hell is this? Yeah. So when he went to Aston Martin, he's dealing with a person in the sort of Ron Dennis form of Lawrence Stroll, where he's going to take no crap, right? And straight away, you know, the infrastructure is there. You know, what you were talking about, May 23, in terms of Silverstone, have that whole thing packaged together. They've put the puzzles together. It was just a matter of when it goes bang. That was just all. It was a matter of time. And we didn't believe it because of how poor they performed the last couple of years. But now that all things have sort of come together, it's almost like, if you're Lawrence Stroll, you're thinking, well, this is inevitable. I don't know what everyone's surprised about here. Yeah. Even the way he walked out. Well, exactly. That walk, people made jokes about it, but that walk at launch, when he knew what time it was. As soon as the launch happened and he just started walking there with his little strut, he knew what time it was. Yeah. And when he saw in testing what was going on with Mercedes, he thought, oh, brilliant. This is even better than I thought. So, yeah, they've had the structures in place. The pieces have been put in the right places. And that's credit to Lawrence Stroll. And you can tell that Aston Martin is dangerous, because look at what Lance did. We talk about Alonso and getting P3, and yes, we should talk about that on the podium and everything else. Lance had no hands and a broken foot, and the guy finished P6.
Chaos.
That is mad.
He was my driver of the day by far, because if you think about it, he was in surgery, 2 weeks ago prior to the race, right? And my man was even clapping at the national anthem, and he was wincing because he realized, like, oh snap, I can't just fully do anything.
I can't clap.
You know, even was it in practice when he was talking about turning the steering wheel all the way around, he said, like, I couldn't because of the hands. Guy finished P6.
Yeah. And not that far off the Mercedes, like he was there.
That was my concern. That was when I said, this is for real. This car's for real. So, that's what's going on with Aston Martin, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, there's serious props do need to be given to Lance Stroll, to be honest with you.
He's nailing it, brother. And I think the only surprise isn't that they were always going to come on, right? Yeah. But I think that they've come on so soon. That's the surprise. People are saying potentially 2025, 2026 after the new rules and regs change again. I expect them to be up there, but that they've turned it around in like 2 years. Like that's bonkers.
What it does give me, and I'm sure a lot of other teams, is just hope as well.
True.
To sort of see an Aston Martin go from, even at the end of last season, we're talking like probably 6th/7th best car on the grid. Yeah. Definitely behind McLaren and Alpine for the majority, maybe challenging them at other places like Kota. To go from that to, we've actually properly overtaken Mercedes on pace. We've got better tyre wear than Ferrari, so we can maybe finish second. And that is nuts over one winter.
Bruv. Negative tyre deg, that famous race sim, that simulation stint at Alonso. I've never heard of something, and that suits Alonso and his bloody jolty style, right? So I think they definitely deserve some praise. A lot of people are like a bit suspicious of them. Everyone is green ball, those guns look a bit familiar, those sideburns. But I think they're cause for a lot of hope and optimism there, and especially to those who say, and there are a lot of people who say that the rules and the regs haven't worked. We're not seeing better racing. Red Bull have gone down the road, and nobody. Well, yes and no. Yeah. Aston Martin are a case in point that the new rules and regs are working, because we see midfield teams rise up out of mid-pack, right, and challenge the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull, and that bodes well, mate.
We were joking as well. I think the regs definitely have had an impact so far, because we were joking last last stream that there isn't really a midfield or there's just a field. Like once you go past Aston Martin and Mercedes, it's a fucking free for all. Like it's anyone's game. Aston could be top of it, Alpine, McLaren, whatever.
Royal Rumble setting.
It is Royal Rumble.
We needed
that.
We needed that because it's been a procession for as long as I've been watching F1. There has been a 2 or 3 tier championship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 1994 as an example, Williams fighting Schumacher's Benetton. Who could compete with these bods? No one.
Yeah.
And so I think 2023 is time for that type of change, and I'm glad to see more people fight.
Very happy.
Look, listen, it's early in the season. We've had one round. Okay, we're all on the Aston Martin hype train.
It's true.
Pulled out of the station, but it's only gone. We've gone one stop. We're not across the country yet.
Yeah.
Sure. However, there are rumours that Aston are going to be as strong, if not stronger, in Saudi Arabia.
Oof.
If this can Aston Martin challenge for a championship?
My gosh, this is chaos. Chaos. I'm not sure, if only because I think Red Bull are really, really strong. What's going to be interesting this season, though, Niran, is we know that they've got this CFD and wind tunnel penalty, right?
Yep.
We know that didn't impact RB19 because the papers were signed on that design philosophy last year, April, and they got the penalty after April, right? But what I'm keen to see is whether there's going to be delayed impact, whether as these other teams start to develop their cars in H2 of 2023, whether they're going to be able to catch us. So they expect necessarily to see Aston Martin challenging Red Bull at Saudi. I can't see that. Being honest, I just think that they've got Red Bull, their RB19, too aerodynamically efficient, too much straight line pace for the likes of Aston Martin and the rest. But what's going to happen later on in the season, right? That's where I'm going to start dialing in and be keen to see whether the delta starts to shrink.
Yeah, because you've got that range, that air wind tunnel range is like 60% for Red Bull. I think it's 105.
I think it is.
Is it for Aston or 110?
I think it was 105. I've read somewhere it was 105
and 63 for Red Bull.
Yeah,
it was 70, and then they've
obviously it's been knocked off.
That's the other thing as well to remember. Where did Aston Martin finish last year? Was it P7?
Bro, I don't even know. I have no clue.
I think they were P7 last year because I think a lot of people thought it was.
They were level on points with Alfa Romeo, I think.
Oh, okay, right, okay.
Which way?
Whoever, yeah. So obviously that time as well, that's kind of gone in the back burner as well. They've had more time to develop than anybody else in terms of ahead of them. But do I see them challenging in Saudi Arabia? Look, I think they'll be exciting to watch. I think inevitably it will be like a Red Bull kind of clean sort of race for them. But yeah, as Cameron said, during the course of this season, when we're racing in the daytime, when we're in Spain or when we're in Imola or whatever else, like I'm intrigued. Baku, I'm intrigued to see what's going to go on there.
To this question, Niran, let me just say about the RB19, we didn't see the full gambit of their pace at Bahrain. We didn't.
Yeah, so worry. Dialed down the car towards the end.
Bruv, we didn't. Let me give you an example. Max, if you'd heard Max in testing, super happy with the balance of the car, right?
Yeah.
Super happy.
Yeah.
FP1, what's going on with my balance, Max says? Yeah. What changed between FP1 and testing? Well, what changed is that they were concerned about eroding the skid block to where they'd get a penalty or disqualified. It's 5 or 10 millimeters, right? So they raised the ride height between testing and FP1, and that gave them those balance issues. Nailed qualifying, turned down their bloody engines during the latter stage of the race to like 8 or 7 out of 10 to manage reliability. Entire deck. These I know it was like 6/10 on average over the course of the race. I wouldn't put it past Red Bull to have in excess of a second on the rest of the field. At 12, when they dial the engines up to 12 and are like full beans, full send, in excess of a second.
Thanks everyone for tuning into the F1 season of 2023.
I was just going to say,
it might be a wrap now.
This is against my religion, but come on, Ferrari, man. Like, we need you to rise, man. Come on, Ferrari, give us something this year, because honestly, they're the only challengers, really, we would argue. Unless we are
argue on pace,
because I think they have got the fastest car, haven't they? Like straight line speed, they're the fastest car. But Formula One, there's how many turns in a race?
Well, let's talk about Ferrari to be fair, because I mean we might as well, right? We might as well. Let's get the Tifosi bashing out of the way.
Let's go
very quickly.
That tyre wear on that car, concern.
Bro,
big concern. Carlos Sainz was Tokyo drifting that round. By the time Aston Martin
he was in reverse, mate. In reverse towards the end of that race. Listen, The car is quick. In absolute terms, the car is quick.
Yeah.
The quickest on there, not named Red Bull. Absolutely. But you don't. But sprint race accepted. You don't get points on a Saturday, right?
Yeah.
And they've been dealing with this last year with the SF17 or the F175. Quick in a straight line, quick round the corners, but a tyre. Charles couldn't even bloody drive it. That's why he kept on binning it in France and Monaco.
Science binned it in practice at Bahrain as well.
Bro.
I honestly, the stat that always it baffles me. I say the stat, I don't actually know the numbers off by heart, but the percentage ratio between Charles Leclerc's poles and wins is absolutely awful.
Daft. 10 to 2, I think, something mad like that. It's daft, bruv. And again, it speaks to how much of a diva and how mercurial that design philosophy
lack of race
of
pace
Ferrari.
that Ferrari just seem to have.
And worse than that, Niran. Worse than that, bruv. And I suppose it's not race pace that they lack, to be precise. It's just that they can't push the car for fear that it's going to catch fire.
Yeah.
Or that the tyre deg is going to have them in a situation where they can't keep, right? That's the issue. And I just think their problems, not dissimilar to Mercedes, their problems are wider spread than the car. Hopefully, Freddie Vasseur can turn things round there. But everything that I'm hearing is that already the hires up at Ferrari are coming down on him, right? Suffocating.
I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, there was a news piece that came out a couple of days ago that's suggesting that he's already got less power than any of the other team principals on the grid.
What do we do?
Because I think he's been appointed almost a boss. What's his name? Benedetto Vigna. Who's basically kind of been appointed as his half boss that's like dealing with a lot of internal stuff at Ferrari. Rather than Fred. And Frederick Vasseur kind of gives me the vibe of a man who just doesn't care for that sort of shit.
He's not,
like he won't take that. He's not just going to sit down like a Binotto.
But Niran, why would you?
I'll allow it. No, thousands, you wouldn't.
You brought me here to turn this ship around and you have a million things that need solving.
Yeah.
You have a million things. I mean, you saw them last year when we chatted last. There were 1,000,001 problems last year, Niran.
Yeah.
1,000,001 problems. Strategy nonsense. They couldn't even put the tyres on. Do you remember when they they instructed Charles to ride over the bloody wheel jack? Like, how noddy do you want these mistakes to get? So you finally brought in a dude for Binotto who can exhibit a little bit of leadership and take you back to the promised land, the Michael Schumacher days, 2000, 2004.
And you take that leadership away from him.
And then you chop off his nuts straight away.
Yeah. That's Ferrari 101 though. Like, they give you many reasons and issues and things to laugh about them with. And you think, just when you think you can't get any worse, because I thought last year, right, this is a watershed moment for them. Look, they finished P2, right? So it's not like they had a terrible, disastrous season, but
Wow.
Yeah, respectively. Yeah, but even this season now, we've got new things to talk about with Ferrari. At least they will keep us entertained this year. I have no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're part of the Tifosi right now, and that's a big ask for you. But if you're part of the Tifosi right now, what are you more concerned about? Charles Leclerc retiring from a pretty, I mean, he was actually, to be honest, I don't know if Alonso would have caught him. I think Leclerc might have just held on to that, depending on his tyre wear and whatever, but he was much further up the road than Carlos. Or are you more concerned about Carlos's pace and the tyre wear at the end of each stint?
Mate.
Because both are a bit of a problem.
And Carlos is meant to have kicked on, training, like understanding his handling dynamic and how to manage.
Mate, about 10 laps in, he was about 8 seconds off Leclerc. I was like, how did this happen? I don't know if he made a mistake or whether he just teleported backwards.
Different league for me is Charles too. Which one am I more concerned about? Mate, the reliability's got to be an issue because if you look at last season, so Charles did make mistakes, Imola, France were the two key ones. 7 and 25 points. I tacked on another 6 points if you account for the places that Max Verstappen gained. I worked out to be about 38 points that Charles had lost on his own back last season. Okay. If you look at strategic errors and reliability nonsense, it's about 140 points, lads, that Max gained on Charles as versus because of those bloody Ferrari mistakes.
Pretty much.
From Ferrari, for everything out of Charles' hands.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, if I'm Tifosi, I'm pointing the finger very firmly at Ferrari, their reliability issues, their nodding mistakes, their inability to manage strategy. That's where if you're talking about improvement year on year,
Yeah.
that's where the bulk of their improvement is going to come from. Not Charles or even Carlos, if we're honest. It's the team.
Yeah, out of the two, I'd say I'm more concerned about Leclerc's sort of, the reliability issues, because I think Carlos over the season, he does improve. And I think Carlos is one of those drivers where at the end of the season, you look at it and you think, actually, it wasn't as bad as I first thought he was. And having him at McLaren as well, like I've sort of seen kind of the growth from his Toro Rosso days up to now. I think Carlos Sainz is a fine, perfect driver for Ferrari. For that team, I think they're fine. Fred will need to decide very early on who is the number one driver, because that's another problem that they had last year. It's kind of, they were sort of juggling both sides, and it was like, as much as we like Carlos Sainz, you really should have thrown the plate at Charles Leclerc. So, for me, it's just the fact that the car does pack up. That's a problem for me, more than Carlos's pace, because I think he will sort of close that gap over the season.
And that's a no decision for me, Peter. Which between Charles and Carlos, which one of them are you going to back? I think Fred's already made it super clear that at a certain stage in the season, if it becomes mission critical to decide on a very distinct driver hierarchy between Charles, then he will make that decision. And I'm sure very, very soon you'll see Charles gapping in terms of cumulative points tally in the championship. Carlos Sainz, he's just the better driver. But I tell you where he's going to have issues. The fact that Banco Santander are still a title sponsor as a Spanish bank.
Yeah.
And who are they, Niran, going to want to see as the guy charging down and winning Silverstone, for example?
His name's not Charles.
His name is not Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
His name is not Charles Leclerc. So Frederick's got a task on his hands, mate, to manage not necessarily the toings and froings of the F1 team itself, but the boardroom. It's very different circumstance to what Toto's going through.
Yeah, boardroom pressures, driver pressure. I mean, it's almost a frustrating one as well for Carlos. For me, looking at Carlos, if this was to continue, again, it's only been one Grand Prix. But there seemed to be that progression late on in the season. A little bit of a charge from Carlos, again, partly caused by poor reliability from Ferrari in regards to Charles, mistakes from Charles as well. But there was a bit more evenness. He should have, he got pole at Kota, got slapped at turn one by George Russell.
Yeah.
All these sorts of things, got a little bit unlucky, and still the points tally was not too bad. He wasn't too far off Charles.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so.
Then be sort of 10 seconds off Charles, like
Standard.
20 laps into the race. It's just
Standard. If the car doesn't speak to his specific driving style, then he's not going to be close, right? I tell you where Carlos can improve on Charles Leclerc's points tally. Race savvy. Saw it at Monaco, right? There were a couple of times last year, even bloody Brazil, when Charles Leclerc, it's cool, put on Inters on my tyres, on my car for Q3, that's fine.
needs to make his own decisions, especially at Ferrari. You've got to make your own decisions.
Absolutely, mate. Carlos isn't having that.
Yeah.
Carlos went out with the wets and put in a time, so I think Carlos he's worthy of some credit in that sense. He's not a submissive and yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. He's going to manage his own thing more than Charles.
Yeah. Well, looking ahead, obviously we've got Saudi Arabia next. We had a great Grand Prix there last. I feel like we've had 2 GPs in Saudi.
Grand Prix, super dangerous though, bro.
Yeah, it's made the
Track of
track. Oh my God.
The thing.
If you have an accident there, it's an airplane crash.
Track
Mick
of
Schumacher knows that well.
Oh mate, track of death.
Yeah.
Track of death. I do get a bit concerned around there. Not to mention, was it last year when they bloody held them hostage? When there was a
Yeah.
Oh,
there
it was. Oh my God, yeah.
There was the
do you remember when there's an explosion going up in the background in free practice or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, what are we doing?
F1 management are just like, guys, it's calm. Don't worry, man. They're just setting off fireworks.
What do you mean you don't want to race? How about,
Are you sure?
How about you don't race?
Yeah.
But good luck getting out of the airport here. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right, this is what
What are your options, guys? Yeah, absolutely. We had this with Bahrain. Do you remember years ago where, again, there was like attacks in Bahrain? It was like, we're just going to crack on. I think it was like more time when we were racing in the daytime in Bahrain. And I remember there'll be like literally bomb attacks there. And it was like, we're going to crack on with it.
What are we doing?
This goes back from like 09 all the way. Like, it's hilarious.
Niran, can we talk about what are we doing here? Like, has the FIA and the FOM sold their soul to the devil quite literally when things like this are happening. Plus, they're oppressing the free speech of the likes of Luce and the likes of Seb.
Oh God! Don't even get me started on
Techie?
that. Yeah.
What are we?
What do we deem problematic things that can't be said anymore?
Niran, what
by
are we
people
doing
like
here?
Seb and Seb's not here anymore.
Where is the moral compass of the hires up at F1 to still
In
be
the bin.
mate, to still be going to these territories that have very debatable human rights records, right? I know it's 2023 and the cost of living is crazy and hyperinflation. Liberty need this money. I get it, Niran, but sometimes I watch these races with a very, very heavy heart, questioning my moral compass for even bloody watching. Should I be watching this?
You know what, as well, I always find it puts drivers in really difficult positions because when you're someone like Lewis Hamilton, you're very vocal about the places that we race and these areas across the globe that probably shouldn't be getting. You know, if we look at the fact that we don't have a Russian Grand Prix anymore, quite rightfully, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But then we go to other places like Qatar. We're going Qatar now for the next 9 years. And I'm just sort of like, and look, F1 is not the only sport. We just had a World Cup in Qatar.
True. Boxing too.
Yeah, boxing in Saudi Arabia constantly. And
Wrestling goes to Saudi as well.
Bruv.
It's tough because at the same time, it's not the people that are the problem in these countries. Like, and sometimes I feel like if we don't go to Saudi Arabia, we don't go to Qatar, it's not the people of Saudi Arabia that could be perceived as a problem there. It's the leadership and government and whatever. So I always feel bad if we sort of deprive the average person from Saudi Arabia who just wants to go and watch some Formula One. If we just take away all those Grand Prix and stuff that we feel are slightly problematic because of what higher ups in the nation do, we're not punishing the people who run the country. We're just punishing the public.
I agree with you, bruv. But still, as a fan, as a lifelong fan of F1, do you not question, Peter, when you're watching and you're like,
we race as one?
Oh my God, are they having a laugh?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Make this make sense, FIA.
Had FIA, FOM, Formula One, had they just not had anything to begin with, we would not be having this conversation in terms of like, you know, if the fact that we do now have, you know, there'll be like a Black History Month, there'll be a breast cancer thing, there'll be something, there'll be all these kind of good causes now brought into the sport, and all you've done now is put pressure on yourself, i.e. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, barring the years past. But the fact that we don't go to Russia, it kind of doesn't really make sense, right? So it's almost like it's selective, you know, what did Chris Rock call it? You know what I'm saying? It was like selective outrage. So it's like, it's almost like we decide to be annoyed and pissed off with Russia, but then, oh, you know what? The bag is heavy over at Qatar.
No, but that is the facts. If we're going to be totally honest, this just comes down to money and always will. F1 know that there is a bag in Saudi Arabia and it's a big one. They know there's a bag in Qatar and they know it's a big one. But we'll do all this sort of fancy we race as one shit. But at the same time, Lewis, you can't really speak out about it, mate, because we've got sponsors to talk about. We've got sponsors to do deals with.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I'd honestly almost rather for F1 just go, yeah, look, lads, this is what it is. The game is the game. Because at the moment, they're lying to themselves and they're just lying to everybody else.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good one because, Formula One is acting like they are innocent in this. And it's like, no. Well, we're sort of like, we believe in equal rights and everything else. And then on the other hand, it's like they're doing something completely different. If they were just straight out like, look, this is what it is, like it or lump it, then it's like it's down to the fans' decision, it's down to the driver's decision to say, okay, this is what Formula One is, this is what they stand for. Do I agree? Does it affect my moral compass as much? Yes or no? And then everybody, you respect everyone's decision from there on, and then you just move on with it.
So what we're talking about here then, fellas, is performative allyship, right? That's what they're doing, a re-race of one thing without, and I suppose maybe FIA and the FOM are deserving of a smidgen, a tiny bit of credit, because they are doing a little bit more than they used to, let's be honest, than the days of Bernie as an example.
Yeah, true.
I would say this though. I still question myself when I'm watching these races. Jeddah a couple of years ago, I didn't watch the year when there was the bloody explosion and Mick crashed. Like I just felt like I had a really bad feeling in my stomach about that whole weekend, so I didn't watch that race. I think there's questions to be asked of us as a fan base, because what are we? Okay, so F1 are doing what they're doing, and I don't have any shares in Liberty Media. But what can we do as a fan base, right? Am I going to cancel my F1 TV membership? Well, probably not, because I enjoy the bloody race. So like how this is a lame duck protest that I'm conducting here on the last lap. I will say this finally as well. I've been watching since like early 90s, yeah? And if there is one story, one thread, a common thread that runs throughout all of F1 history, is his corruption.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Balestre with bloody Prost and Senna back in the day. Damon Hill still smarting and throwing up in his mouth because of how Schumacher did him in '94 at Adelaide. Jerez, Villeneuve and Schumacher. This is this corruption and
Briatore.
Mate, let's not do Crashgate, Spygate. This is like
the gates, man.
This is, and I am conflating issues, but I think you can put these things under sports washing broadly, and the bag being the bag, the game being the game. I think you can put that under an umbrella heading, right? It's all kind of, they're all brother and sister in the same family, and it's the oldest story in F1 history, sadly. I don't think anything's going to change. Probably will get worse, chaps. It will get worse with Liberty Media. I mean, they're looking to secure the back Netflix, Drive to Survive. What do you think all that was in aid of?
Ultimately, when you want to expand a sport, you need to go everywhere in the world.
Right.
I mean, hopefully we get a Grand Prix in Africa at some point, lads. That'd be great. Or the Caribbean. Could you imagine a Grand Prix in the Caribbean? Yes. Oh my God.
That would be incredible.
The Trinidad and Tobago Grand Prix.
You know,
Jamaica.
We make that happen.
Jamaica
That would be sick.
epic, but the roads wouldn't be very good, I will say.
Yeah, facts. It would be good vibes, but that is like...
Where is the bag? That's the question that they'll be asking. They'll say, listen, you know, because in Africa, for example, where do you look? Is it South Africa? Is it, you know, you're limiting, because not everyone's going to be like, we can facilitate. I mean, we don't have a German Grand Prix. We don't have a French Grand Prix.
It's chaos.
Places that we have been, you know, China's struggling to even hold a race for us, right? And you'd think, you know, people would love to have races here because of the history. But the fact that, you know, Silverstone at one point was on its knees about signing a new contract.
Crazy.
Which would have been mental, you know? So
how dare they?
Listen, Africa, Caribbean, whoever, South America, like, bring the bag. That's what
That's what you got to
do, unfortunately.
That's chaos, lads. That we're there. That fills me with sadness and sorrow.
Yeah, it's sad.
That it is very much the bag and everything else just
bag first and foremost.
Everything just fades into black, man. But that is sports washing. That's what we're dealing with. This isn't specific to F1, right?
No,
World Cup, for crying out loud, like you mentioned, and it's a broader sports, a global issue for sports. The intersection between sports and political affairs, and I think this isn't nothing new. It's always been like that.
It's always been,
and it is always gonna be like that. Niran and Peter said.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, we've obviously we've got, as I mentioned, we've got Saudi Arabia coming up next. Despite the controversy, we are there for a third Grand Prix. Third Grand Prix. We're going there. What can we actually expect? I know we've mentioned like it's a very fast paced track.
Risky.
Walls very close. You've seen some monster crashes there. Hopefully not this weekend. What can we expect realistically? Red Bull are going there as obviously massive favourites again. Ferrari will be hoping to push them as close as they did at the very least last season with Leclerc and Verstappen battling only half a second between them at the end of the race. Sergio Perez will be hoping not to get stiffed by a safety car this time as well. And
stiffed by his bloody team like he did in Bahrain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Set him up on a decent strategy and then called him in when he was supposed to be going long. To your point, Niran, there's a couple of things that I'm looking for. I'd love to see Aston Martin in the hands of Fernando El Plan Alonso get close to Max Verstappen. If we could get those two fighting. Oh, mate. Gold.
That is
gold. Everybody would be tuning in for cheeky Fernando and Verstappen duel. I'm also keen. I think Max, for me, again, you can ask all the questions of his person and his character.
Sure.
Doesn't seem like the funnest guy. I don't know if you want to go to the pub with Max Verstappen necessarily and have a cheeky bevy, but that's I digress. In that RB19 levels, if you go, I would ask everyone to go back and watch the onboard of his lap at Bahrain. No fuss. He looks like driving Miss Daisy in that, super smooth on the inputs. It just looks all easy. For me, he's operating on a different level. And again, cast your mind back to 2021 and his qualifying lap that he ultimately binned in Sector 3.
Yeah.
God tier moment for me. I'm not sure I've ever seen two better Sector 1 and Sector 2s, notwithstanding the fact that he didn't complete the lap, of course.
Yeah.
Keen to see what Max does in qualifying, keen to see the onboards, and keen to see whether Ferrari can sort their bloody lives out and stop Charles Leclerc from looking elsewhere, potentially. Mercedes, potentially.
Could you imagine?
Could you?
They got to do something though, mate, because he will leave. He's too good, right?
Yeah.
He will leave.
He's too good to be dealing
He
with
will
their
leave.
nonsense
He
on
will.
a frequent basis.
The annoying thing is, what's annoying to not see from Ferrari is that them both their drivers going full pelt on that car, because as we've mentioned, like they're probably too nervous to go all the way, because if they do, then something's going to kick off. Max loves that circuit. Like he loves that's in the circuit in Jeddah. I think you can't look past a Max pole position as well as winning the race. What actually does happen? Can we see Alonso swing in with Max? Because he was talking a little bit of big talk as well, like, yo, this car is great and there's more to come. I'm thinking, hello, okay. And as soon as Saudi Arabia. So Alonso might be speaking something here. We might have a much more full health Lance Stroll as well to be in the mix with Perez maybe, or with the Ferraris, whatever. But yeah, I genuinely think that, Max is gone and then it's a case of Alonso, let's see where he can sandwich himself this time.
Can I ask you a question, Pete? There's one team that we haven't touched on thus far. I'm sure that you have this on your agenda, Niran.
Yeah, don't worry, it was next.
McLaren.
Yeah.
Are we allowed?
Yeah, we are. We are firmly.
Okay.
Now, obviously, we've got Peter here in McLaren merch, ready to discuss what on earth Bahrain was and what on earth you're expecting for Saudi Arabia.
Look, question. Were we better this year's Bahrain as we were last year? I would argue probably to a degree, because all the cars have got better, all the cars have got faster, right? But we finished, we were the only team on the podium, by the way, last year outside of the top three, right? Remember, Lando Norris got that Imola podium, yeah? Oh dear. I think with McLaren, what's annoying is it's the fact that the excuse has been made that we got caught out last year with the regulations slightly changing, so it's kind of messed up our whole sort of design of what we were going to do with this car with the next couple of years. We've had to restart a new car as well, and we haven't got our wind tunnel yet. We haven't got all the right pieces are not actually there in place, and Andrea Stella's got a huge job on his hands. And whether Seidel kind of dipped, knowing like,
this is a wrap.
This is long. This is actually kind of long. It might be one of those situations there, but I genuinely think, look, he's got his own fish to fry at Sauber. But I think with McLaren, I don't think McLaren fans should panic. I'm here to give people some safety net.
You're here to give them.
I'm here
to
give them
the
safety net, because this is what it is. Because last year we were sweating and we were thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on with this McLaren? Because we were, since Zach came in and Seidel came in, we were actually slowly progressing, slowly but surely. Then Ferrari kind of just left us last year, and it was like, oh damn, what are we gonna do? So I think there's going to be slow stages with our car this year. Baku, just keep your eyes closed and wake up in Baku, McLaren fans. That's what I'll say, because that's when that upgrade comes there. Don't expect necessarily too much from the next couple of races. It's Saudi and Australia. So I wouldn't expect too much from these two. But I think over the course of the season, I was hearing people saying we're lucky to finish sixth. No. We will be. Stella said we're fighting for top four. That's what he said,
mate.
That's what he said.
Champions League settings.
And the thing is, he knew this. It's not like he didn't know what this car was capable of. He said this at testing. So I'm sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, that's a bold move to make. Now, did he know Aston Martin would be where they are? Maybe. Because Aston Martin was spoken about. There was whispers going around before they first went out on track. Then they proved, oh yeah, this car is quick. I think I think we'll finish P5 this year.
Peter, you know what I think? I think that them
There's a lot of copium going on there.
I think that them man are selling wolf tickets and snake oil.
Yeah.
That's what I think. That's nonsense, bruv.
We will get there.
Evidently nonsense.
Listen.
That car, come on.
Our tunnel's coming. Our tunnel's coming this year. Right? It might not work too much on this year's car. It might work on next year's car. 2025, yeah, Aston Martin, watch your backs, okay? But you know, that's the here nor there. That's here nor there.
Come on.
2025, watch your
Come on,
back.
Peter.
Like anyone could be there in 2025. But yeah, no, I think, look, I don't think it's as doom and gloom as everybody has portrayed it to be, as the media has portrayed it to be. I mean, I saw people's predictions and they were putting us last in the constructors. I thought, we're not slower than the Williams, we're not slower than the Haas, we're not slower than Alfa Romeo, nor Alfa Tauri.
Yet.
Now, do you know what I mean? Like I genuinely think over the course of the season, because they're not a shoddy team. It's just they all know what the problem is. Look, we didn't even make our own targets, right? So never mind like trying to reach anybody else's. We flopped our own base at the start of the season. Cool. Let's rectify that problem. Mercedes, yeah, let's rectify that problem. And over the course of the season, I think, you know, slowly but surely, we will be back to a place of integrity with McLaren. I don't think we're as bad as we were.
Go on, sorry.
I was about to say, one thing I do agree with is better than last year. Technically speaking. No, I mean, it's in the first Grand Prix of last year. If we looked at Bahrain last year, you literally finished like 19th or 20th.
Last year was a shock. Last year was an absolute, because of the year prior, because 2020 was decent, right? Yeah, we lost out to Ferrari at the end, but it was a decent season. And we could have had a race win. We could have had 2 race wins that year. We had one with Danny Rick, but Lando in Russia, you know, unfortunately. But the thing is, last year, like no McLaren fan expected to see what happened when they saw Bahrain. And we were like, you know, the brakes couldn't stop firing or whatever else. And then we had Danny Ricciardo in the car as well, who was not having the best season. Now, whether it's a case of it's to do with the fact that, you know, Danny Rick needs to have a specific type of car, because he's not a slouch. He needs to have the specific type of car in order to be back at the front end of the grid. I think McLaren will get there over the line over the course of time, and we'll swing with Alpine.
May I, Niran? Permission to intervene. The people versus McLaren. May the prosecution approach the stand. Look, check this out. The car is an SH1T box, and it's been. There are parallels between Mercedes and McLaren, not least the engine. Yeah.
We're having a mid-off here, by the way, Mercedes versus...
Oh, yeah.
It's the mid-off.
Look, so there are parallels. What these drivers don't want, as I understand, is unpredictability and instability. That's why Danny Rick couldn't handle it. Last of the late breakers, Danny Rick jumps on the brake pedal as late as possible and doesn't know what the bloody car is going to do. Is he going to oversteer? Is he going to understeer? Am I going to get instability on turning, apex, on the exit of the corner? I have no idea. So that's why Danny Rick couldn't drive it, and that's why Lando is out here punching walls, because he's frustrated with the car and the handling dynamic. Here's a similarity: the design philosophy at Mercedes, they've done this peaky performance curve nonsense, where if it's a full moon and Lewis has had his Weetabix that morning, if everything aligns, mate, if the stars align and everything's perfect, then potentially they could have the quickest car on the grid, potentially. Problem being, that happens 1 in 365 bloody days of the year. The rest of the year, Red Bull have an RB18 and RB19 now, where a lower performance curve, but with more area accessible underneath it. McLaren have done a similar thing, right? They have a car that, again, Weetabix, full moon, potentially be quite quick, but it's accessing that and having Lando not be so cheesed off to where he's punching walls, because he doesn't know on turning what the car's going to do. Yeah. What's that about, mate? That's your problem.
The fact is, like, when I said, like, the car is better than last year in terms of, like, relatively from Bahrain to Bahrain, I do agree in terms of pace. The problem that you have now is that was all down to just not understanding the car. Yeah. We all understand the cars now. You're not going to find that level of time during a season again. But what's good and the gap between McLaren and the field, not the midfield, to Mercedes and Aston Martin was large at Bahrain. Bridging that, you are hoping for best of the rest, realistically. And that's not what McLaren should be hoping for. We've had enough opportunities now, realistically. And I love McLaren, you know, I love Lando, whatever. I'm I want McLaren to bridge that gap.
It's McLaren.
It's McLaren.
No,
Aston
absolutely.
Martin have done
FFS.
it.
Bruce.
It's possible. It's possible. McLaren are next up. Do you know what I mean? They should always be there as the next team. If they're not there, they should be the team that is about to be there.
Sure.
Day-glow McLaren settings. That's my favourite livery to this bloody day. McLaren, this is heritage that we're talking about now. And I don't want to get all Arsenal 2017 on you, mate. But there needs to be, bruv, there needs to be change. And you know what? Some may say that Mr. Zach Brown might be on fraud watch imminently if he isn't already. Peter, tell me I'm talking rubbish here.
Well, interesting, because Zach Brown now is focused solely on the business of McLaren, right? So, and that's what he's been doing. And McLaren's been doing great. Remember when he rocked up, we had no sponsors, right? Now that car's tattooed with everything you can find, right?
Sponsors don't make the car go quick.
No, of course not. But he brings the money in. We were making people redundant. We were, people on furlough and whatnot.
This is fair.
Business side, as a CEO, he's doing his job. And hence why we needed a Seidel, we need a Stella to deal with the performance. And I think over the course of time, maybe Stella's the Mikel Arteta of the situation. Who knows? You never know whether or not. I'm just saying, just trust the process. Look, the good thing, what I like about this situation is, look, McLaren messed up and they know they messed up and they said, right, let's start again. So we are going to be on the back burner for a bit. Hold tight. We will be back. In, like I say, in the next couple of years is when you're looking at McLaren being, as you said, the next one. If they're not there, it's the next team that will be arriving. James Key is the fraud watch, not necessarily Zach Brown.
Oh, let's go. The only reason why I put Zach Brown, not me personally, but the community has put Zach Brown on fraud watch potentially, is because wasn't he saying 2 years from now, 2 years ago? He was. So what's happened with that?
It depends.
Gone backwards.
It depends. It depends who made that. The thing is, the regulation did change, right? But also, who's made that mistake in the designing of that car, in the concept of what the car was meant to be for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And also, a couple of things. And I don't want to put the blame on this because I don't think it's fair. But just the idea that our wind tunnel is where? In Cologne, right? And we're getting parts. Is it Toyota's old spot?
That's chaos.
No, but like, if we
Ron Dennis used the cursed Toyota.
If we used to, now we're using Toyota's, what they used to have. So we're renting that space. That's going to cost shed loads of money. Then when we decide that we're going to use something that's going to be worthy of the car, we have to wait for it to get delivered. I mean, like there's all kinds of. So we need to make sure that we can have everything in house and then crack on. Because when you look at our like facilities, especially like sort of MCQ or whatever, like that place is state of the art. So it's almost like we've almost got all the puzzles in place, bar that wind tunnel. I think that's the last piece of the puzzle. But James Key is he has to. What's ironic is he seems to be getting more and more responsibility. And look where McLaren has gone the last couple of years. Whereas when Seidel and Zach came in, we kind of went up from what was before, because it was hell on earth, 2017, 18 type of, those sort of times.
Peter, I would say the issue is I was listening to a conversation between Toto and his missus, Susie Wolf.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And they were talking about leadership and accountability. And Susie encountered when she was managing her team, encountered some issues with the front axle and complained to Toto and said, front axle, this is damaging our team. But what the fudge do I know about front axles?
Yeah.
Toto's response is, as the leader of this team, the buck stops with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fix it, Susie. Toto responded. And so I respond in kind similarly to Zach Brown. All of the design issues, okay, so you haven't got the pen out, you're not Adrian New, you're not designing the car, but ultimately the buck stops with you.
You hire and find the right people to do the job.
You hire and fire the right people. Ultimately, at the board meeting with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, you are going to be held responsible.
Yeah.
So what now? What's the action, Zach? Because you said 2 years, we'll be challenging. That 24 months has elapsed now.
Yeah.
And we are not challenging, say McLaren fans.
Yeah. A big thing as well for McLaren, and this is the last thing before we get into the last segment. I just want to ask as well, we spoke about drivers, the driver lineup at McLaren. We spoke about Lando a lot, and where he goes if McLaren don't perform. I want to, if you're Oscar Piastri, what are you thinking right now? Because you're new, you've just arrived, you've got plenty of time, it's all good.
Do you know what,
But at the same time, you just sacked off Alpine.
McLaren. It depends what kind of rationale you have. Are you somebody who is very reactive? You see a situation come at you and then you sort of get emotionally reactive in that situation, or do you look at the scope long term?
Yeah.
Alpine for him, you know, yes, thing with Alpine as a team, in all the years of history in Formula One, they've always had potential. We've never seen that potential come into fruition since Alonso winning a title there, right? So you look at the Alpine, and I can understand, maybe he saw the mess. Maybe he saw the mess Alonso saw. Mark Webber as well, being his, you know, his sort of his right-hand man, sort of thinking, no. He's seeing what the issues could be here and where you need to position yourself in order to try and put yourself closer to the front of the grid as you can. Now, McLaren are in a bit of a mess right now. At least Oscar, this season, can hide behind that car. Because at least he can say, you know what, he's come through with this big reputation of how great he was in F2 and F3 and whatnot, and how much of a great driver he is. And don't get me wrong, I think he's a sensational driver. He can hide behind this. He doesn't need to panic. He will have his eyes on Alpine, watching them over the course of the season. They won't be that spectacular, and they won't be that far off McLaren.
Oh, hold on a second, Peter. I'm gonna fact check your maths
boom.
here.
Boom,
So
boom.
you just talked about Renault and said that they haven't delivered since Alonso, yeah?
Properly, like, so,
2006, yeah?
Yeah.
When was the last time that McLaren delivered?
sure.
08.
2008, yeah.
The prosecution rests.
But,
No further
but
questions.
the difference is that Renault, Alpine, they kind of were always at the precipice of like, now next year they'll be there. Next year they'll be at the front.
What's Zach Brown been saying, Peter?
Say again?
Zach Brown's been saying exactly the same
No,
thing.
but Zach Brown's got like 2 years of experience in that part. We're talking about Renault from like 2010, from like 2013,
Same team,
then
Peter.
again in 2015. When Ricciardo joined the team, it was on the up and it was right there on the cusp. And then it's fallen again. And then again, here we are with Otmar, and we're looking at a team that, they're going to come to they can sort of have a knock on the door in that third place. And again, where are they? Where are Alpine this year, in your opinion?
I actually, honestly, on my life, I don't know.
Exactly. Because
If there's one team that I genuinely don't know where the heck they're going to
they've got speed.
stack up is Alpine.
I think there might be... After Aston, let's look at this now. We're going to have to change
Good
the
recovery from
definition.
Gasly, by the way.
Oh, yeah, true. I was going to have to change the definition of the big three, right? So after after Aston, Ferrari, and Red Bull, I think
Mate, put Mercedes in that category. I'm telling you, the Mercedes,
It's up for it.
Mercedes
Yeah,
will finish third, even maybe second this season. Mercedes is third and second. Forget fourth. They're not fourth. They're the top three side in Formula One.
I don't hear it, but still.
I don't hear.
Fair enough. Let's wait. 22 races to go.
Yeah, trust.
You know what I'm saying? We'll see over the course of the season. And like I said, they're no mugs. They're gonna sort their mess out eventually. And sorry to use that word, but they will get better over the course of the season. That's the top three. Aston Martin's fourth, fighting and swinging second and third places. Right? They're swinging, but they are fourth.
I don't know if I'm buying you Wolf tickets, you know, Peter.
Say it again.
I don't know if I'm buying you Wolf tickets on
Fair enough.
Mercedes. how in a cost cap era, and this is a rhetorical question, how in a cost cap era do you ditch the no side pod having W14 and configure yourself a brand new design philosophy mid-season
It's gonna be
when
tough.
you had no plan B?
Yeah.
In a cost cap, 135 million or whatever it is now.
Even for next season,
Houseway.
it's going to be. It's not completely irreversible, but I think they would just, if they were going to do that, they just have to accept
Next
that next
season?
season's going to be tough.
But that's where you place all. That's the basket in which you place all
Yeah.
your eggs. Similarly with McLaren.
As Toto says, the time doesn't lie, the stopwatch doesn't lie, but so does the points on the board. They don't lie.
Yeah, no,
They
fine.
don't lie. So we'll see as the season goes on.
I'm fingers and toes crossed for McLaren, man. They were once upon a time my favourite team. Dayglow McLaren, behave yourself. That was ridiculous. Senna and Prost.
Good times. Good
Bruce
times.
McLaren, R.I.P.
Free McLaren. Free McLaren.
Imagine that, an Aussie in a Kiwi team. I say Kiwi at Jace. But yeah. That's interesting.
Well, listen, I can't wait to see how the field shakes out, to be honest with you, for Saudi Arabia. It's going to be a sensational race. Hopefully going to be a sensational season as well. But we've got the final segment of the show now to wrap things up with. It's Equal Machinery. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the segment of the show, or the segment of the pod, where we are allocated a driver each by our lovely producer, Lewis.
Nice.
And we have to debate who would win in Equal Machinery. Everyone's in the same car. Who comes out on top in their prime? Now, this week is a little bit different. We've twisted things up a little bit.
Oh.
We've got the most overrated driver in equal machinery. We've been allocated a driver each, and we've got to debate why we think, if anything, they would lose in equal machinery.
Oh my gosh.
In it, what a spin.
Oh, God,
Madness.
Oh my gosh, Lewis, I hope you haven't stitched me up, mate. I hope you haven't stitched me up.
Well, it's okay, because I've got Lewis. I've been allocated Lewis Hamilton. You, Pete, you've got Daniel Ricciardo.
Interesting.
That should be hopefully simple for you, because having watched him at McLaren.
Yeah.
You know, from the McLaren angle. And you, Cam, you've got Max Verstappen.
Good luck with that one.
Lewis. Gonna have words, mate. Gonna have words.
Pete, I'm going to let you go first.
So we're arguing why they will not win.
Yeah,
in this
why they're
equal-
overrated. Why you think they are an overrated driver in comparison to the rest of the world.
In comparison to the rest. I mean, look.
Got a minute each to explain, by the way, so give me 1 second and I'll get my stopwatch up.
Oh, dear.
Or my timer. But yeah.
Talk about pressure. You've got minutes and everything on there.
Yeah, realistically, Peter, I think you're probably going to go first here. I feel like Cam is writing notes as we speak, so he's not ready yet. We've got to give him at least a second. But Peter, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, sensational. Let's have it.
Let's go. So Danny Ricciardo has been in a Red Bull before and hasn't won a championship with Red Bull. And he got beat by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. So therefore, Max Verstappen obviously is better than Danny Ricciardo in equal machinery.
Yeah, that's mad. You're already done. All right, go.
Danny Ricciardo, excuse me. Danny Ricciardo needs to have a perfect car in order for him to win races. Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen don't necessarily need to have the best car in order to win races or win championships. And for that reason alone, Danny Ricciardo, overrated, will not win in equal machinery.
Fairs. He didn't even need the final 25 seconds. I respect that. He's just beefed our drivers during
the quick stop
during the
family
war.
tree.
What's beef? Notorious B.I.G.
Goodness me. Okay, that was actually good.
Yeah,
that was decent.
Was that right?
You know, Daniel, obviously, beat by Max Verstappen in a Red Bull.
Yeah.
Then again, beat Vettel in a Red Bull. I love Danny, to be honest with you. So I always find it hard to hear the beef against him.
Danny's the boy. Come on, Danny's the boy. Love him to bits.
Would you like to go next, or have you? Or would
no, mate. You
yeah. I knew you were going to say that. Right. So I'm Lewis. Oh my goodness gracious. Right. Okay. So Lewis Hamilton, the most overrated driver in equal machinery here, because the majority of his championships have been won in by far the easiest car against. By far the best car, on the grid, not the easiest car. By far the best car on the grid against a teammate who simply isn't up to scratch with him. Nico Rosberg and Valtteri Bottas, both not of a level, even close to Lewis Hamilton, if we're going to be totally real. Valtteri especially, during those final seasons of Lewis Hamilton winning things. In terms of the records, again, obviously we've got more tracks on the calendar these days, more races on the calendar. You're gonna earn more wins than a Michael Schumacher, this sort of thing. Again, if we're looking at things totally, 6 of those 7 titles in a Mercedes, where there was basically no competition from any team outside of that. Nico Rosberg, decent driver, beat him once, and even that shouldn't really have happened if we're going to be real.
Boom, bam.
Oh, well, that's the segment that we're going to have to discuss these.
Yeah.
Smoke.
He said a lot in that.
Be
in that
blasphemy.
The blasphemy.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh.
You've got to do it for the content, man.
Yeah, to do for the
That's
content.
what you've got to do it for
We
the
need
content.
to argue that, Niran. That's another bloody
Great. It's a great. It's a great.
That's
debate.
chaos. How dare you, Niran? That is chaos in
We'll
itself.
find out whether I meant it after. We'll find out.
Yeah,
whether
we're gonna have to come back to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Cameron's scribbling notes, like trying to get his piece together.
Well,
and then he's hearing it.
I'm all out
He's
now.
not something about my speech.
I can't talk about Max now. Go on then. So,
All right, fair enough.
cracking.
Right, let's go.
Greatness, they say, is a function of longevity. This isn't a one-night thing. And sadly, Max Verstappen, in terms of greatness and being overrated, has only 2 championships to his name. They call him great. Some may say he's the greatest F1 driver to ever get behind a steering wheel. That is not incorrect by virtue of the fact that he hasn't won for long enough. People will level at him the criticism that he hasn't done it in adversity. There is a massive asterisk and will always be over his 2021 title Abu Dhabi fiasco. Michael Massey settings, of course. How will Max Verstappen fare when challenged over the course of a season by a Lewis Hamilton, by a Charles Leclerc? Will he crumble, as some say he did in 2021, or will he be able to rise up to the challenge?
Good.
Very strong. Very strong.
That was decent. He's competed against Lewis Hamilton, though.
And how did that work out for him if Michael Massey didn't fluff his lines?
Yeah, fair enough. Facts.
Good.
Okay, no,
Plus
fair
there's an
enough.
example.
Fair enough.
And Checo as well. You know what, mate? Something to be said for the direction of the philosophy. Do they take it away from Checo and more towards Max Verstappen in terms of his front twitchy thing?
Drivability and stuff.
Checo would have something to say, wouldn't he? But I digress.
Right, some compelling arguments there. I'll be totally honest with you. We're going to decide whether we genuinely believe what we've said here and who we actually think would maybe be bottom of the pile, I guess, out of these three. I'm going to be... There was elements that I believe you believed whilst you were saying that, but I think overall you do believe in the ability of Max. It's just the asterisk of 2021. Because if we look at last season, I mean, it was...
And he was incredible in 2021 over the course
absolutely.
of it. Let's completely discount what happened in Abu Dhabi.
Just
to go
up to that point.
to go into Abu Dhabi level with Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion. Holy smoke, you can't be... you can't do that and be shabby, eh? No. You can't. He was brilliant in 2021 and Silverstone, Baku happened. Like... He's incredible, but there are questions still. And it's too early to say. It's too early to have that conversation about Max, right, with 100%. 2 championships in the bag. Let's revisit in 10 years' time and then we'll be able to have a more holistic, representative conversation of where Max is.
In your opinion, in that 21 season, which was the better car, Mercedes or Red Bull that year?
Mate, I've done so much research on this.
Because I would say Red Bull was the better car, and Lewis drove the wheels off of that Mercedes. And
it's so minute.
And he kind of papered over the cracks that Mercedes were having that season.
It's
You say Mercedes are the quicker car?
No, Red Bull.
Okay, so it depends who you talk to, right? The guys at the race have done a fantastic bit of analysis where they do the super times, and over the course of it, they said that the Red Bull, it's as near as makes it, they're very, very close.
Okay.
But they said Red Bull, in absolute terms, over the course of a race, their super times were quick, and it's like 0.05 or something like that. Don't quote me. Adrian Newey, however, if you talk to him, he's convinced that Red Bull had the quickest car. But then, I don't know, Nasher of Quick Stop, bless him, he would swear blind, going to his grave, that Mercedes, his eyes told him that the Red Bull had the quickest car. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think that just shows how close it was, though.
Red Bull. Maybe it was Red Bull.
Look how bad Bottas was. That's the level. If you can't, there's small things you could split between Hamilton and Verstappen that year. Hamilton's driving in 2021 was outrageous for what I think that car was. But then I look at Bottas, and it was Verstappen's teammate. It was Perez in 2021.
Checo.
It was Checo.
Minister of Defence.
Checo was much better than Bottas. Much better than Bottas.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I look at it like,
oh shit! Sorry, I've misquoted. The race said that Mercedes had the quicker car.
Right,
the race said Mercedes. Adrian Newey said that Red Bull, and a lot of the community are thinking that Red Bull had the
Red
quickest.
Bull. I think it's just so close. It's so.
It was very close. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I'm sorry, Nico Rosberg. I do believe in you a bit, but I mean, we're going to be honest. Lewis was the better driver and was always had that edge as a teammate. But the Valtteri, I mean, that was just a whitewash era.
True. Valtteri, the lights were too bright for Valtteri in that Mercedes. But you know what I wanted to address you on there? You know when you said, because you've echoed the points that a lot of the community make, right? That Lewis only won those championships wholly attributable to the fact that the car was so much faster than the rest. You
don't put yourself in that position to be in that car without the ability anyway.
The best drivers 9 times out of 10 will find themselves in the best car first and foremost. And who in F1 history has ever won in a car not capable of winning a championship? Who?
Yeah, no, I know.
Who?
Kimi
Never
Räikkönen?
happened. Who?
Kimi Räikkönen?
I suppose, but McLaren gave it to.
It was still a solid-ish car.
That's
Anyway.
the exception.
Do you know because
proves
that
the rule,
question always
Peter.
gets banded. Because
Yeah,
it's a fair
yeah.
question. It's very
It's the
very much a fair
exception that
question.
proves
But
the
I always
rule.
just throw that little, Kimi 2007.
Yeah.
Throw that in.
It's
No, but you're right.
At the end of the day, yeah, like the best drivers end up with the best car.
Absolutely,
Obviously,
mate.
yeah, that Mercedes was pretty damn dominant, but you always get dominant cars throughout the course of history. And if
Mate.
you're a good driver, you end up in those cars. So.
I will say in defence of what you said, to play devil's advocate, if you check out the deltas of historic Bahrain qualifying sessions, so I just did a cheeky bit of analysis because I'm a geek like that and I like numbers. 0.3 was the difference between Red Bull and the next best, Charles. Charles did like 90 seconds.
Yeah.
0.3 was the delta. So I checked out like 2014, 2015, and they were all, the deltas in quali at Bahrain were much bigger than what we saw from Red Bull, like 0.5, 0.9.
Yeah.
So if you're arguing, Niran, to your point, and this is where I think you might have nailed it, the extent to which Mercedes dominated in those years is greater than even RB19 probably, even at Full Beans over the rest of the
no.
field.
1,000%. I mean, yeah, the field spread has always shrunk over time. But during that era, it was so large between the top. So it was massive. But you've still got to beat your teammate. And he did that most of the time.
Yeah.
I'll give it
we're going to wrap things up there, though, because we are a little bit short for time.
I take it I won that then.
Yeah. I feel like yours was short and snappy. I think
And I believed it. He hasn't won a championship and he couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, I think he's a great driver. I think he can, win races and whatnot. But yeah, at the end of it, I mean, Hamilton and Verstappen.
Daniel, I wouldn't have it. Get back in the Red Bull next season and win that championship, Sam.
What did Horner say? He
Sergio
ran away
Perez.
from a fight. And he was fighting at McLaren. Okay, fair enough. He got sacked, but he ditched Renault. So
I wouldn't have it. Daniel, I would not have it, Sunshine. I wouldn't have it. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you, guys. Thank you both.
No,
of you
thank you. Thank you for having
coming
me.
on. Got Peter and Paul, Cam as well. Let them know where you can be found.
Yeah, so Peter and Paul on YouTube and McLaren Fan TV on YouTube and Twitter as well.
Sensational, Cam.
Let's go. CameronF1 on the YouTubes, CameronF1 Live on the YouTubes, and CameronF1 YT on Twitter for all sorts of F1 fraudulence.
Scintillating stuff. Sensational. We'll be back for the live show for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix on Sunday. I hope you guys are looking forward to it. Obviously, we'll record the pod as well. If you are watching on YouTube, then of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Turn on the bell notification so that you get told when we're uploading, when the clips are going out, all that jazz. You can find the clips on TikTok as well. And of course, if you're listening on Spotify, give us a 5-star rating if possible. You can also, where can we be found today? We can be found on your Panasonic Smart TV and in the back of the Daily Mirror, the advertising section. That's audio only though, so you can't unfortunately do visuals there. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time. Adios.
Peace.